Princess Ilara gazed out of the grand windows of her palace, looking over the vast city below. The streets were full of life, the market stalls bright with colors, and the sky above was streaked with the colors of distant stars. But despite the beauty surrounding her, Ilara felt a deep emptiness. She was the only daughter of the king and queen of the largest empire in the galaxy, yet she often felt more like a shadow than a person. Her parents were kind and loved her deeply, but the royal duties they were bound to often kept them busy. Ilara had always been a quiet, thoughtful girl, preferring to read about far-off worlds and the creatures who lived in them, rather than attend the endless meetings and ceremonies her parents arranged. Her heart longed for adventure, for someone who could see her for who she was, not just the future queen that everyone expected her to be. But that was the problem. Ilara was a princess. To most suitors, she was simply a prize to win, a stepping stone to power. The suitors who came to her palace were from all over the galaxy, warriors, scholars, diplomats, but none of them seemed to care about who she really was. They were interested in her title, her land, and her connection to the throne. It made her feel as if she was nothing more than an object. The latest suitor was no different. Lord Zakar, a tall, imposing figure from the far reaches of the star system, had arrived with all the pomp and ceremony his people could muster. He spoke highly of his accomplishments and his army, constantly boasting of his family's legacy, and how well it would align with the royal family's own. He never once asked Ilara about her thoughts or dreams. He only spoke of alliances and power. Ilara listened politely, offering little more than a quiet smile and a few polite words. Deep inside, she wished she could say something, anything that would make him see that she was more than just her title. She wanted someone to know her heart, not just her name. After the formal dinner, the court gathered for a grand celebration. Music played, and the alien diplomats mingled, exchanging stories of their travels. Ilara found herself standing in the corner, surrounded by people who were all busy with their own lives, none noticing her. Zakar was speaking with her mother, the queen, and he seemed to be enjoying himself. Ilara turned away and walked to the balcony, hoping for a moment of peace. The stars twinkled overhead, and she couldn't help but wonder if any of the beings out there, beyond the empire, could understand her longing. But no one came. No one noticed her. She sighed, leaning against the railing. She had dreamed of a life full of excitement and real connection, but instead, she was stuck in a golden cage. The loneliness was becoming unbearable. Ilara's mind wandered to the humans. They were often dismissed by her people as insignificant. The Empire's leaders never took them seriously. They were seen as primitive, their technology far behind the great empires of the galaxy. Still, Ilara had heard stories. There were whispers among the servants, the scholars, and even a few daring nobles who had encountered the humans during their travels. They spoke of human resilience, their courage in the face of danger, and their ability to connect with others in ways that no alien could. Ilara had always been curious about them, but she had never met one. It wasn't until recently that her father had agreed to send a diplomatic envoy to Earth to strengthen ties with the humans. Ilara had not been too interested at first. After all, the humans were just a curiosity, nothing more. But as time passed, her thoughts drifted back to them. What would it be like to meet someone who wasn't interested in her title or her kingdom? Someone who might look at her as just another person, not as a princess. She sighed again, her shoulders heavy with the weight of her thoughts. Maybe it was foolish to dream of such things. After all, she had everything she could ever need: wealth, status, and a future as the ruler of a great empire. But something in her heart told her that none of those things would ever bring her true happiness. She needed more. Suddenly she heard footsteps approaching from behind. Ilara turned to see her father, King Theron, walking toward her. His face was kind but serious, and his heavy robes shimmered in the light of the palace. "My daughter," the king said softly, "why so far from the celebration?" "The night is young, and there is much to be done." Ilara smiled gently, trying to hide her sadness. "I was just enjoying the view, father," she replied. "Should join the others," the king said, his voice full of warmth. There is someone you must meet tonight. Suitor from the far reaches of the galaxy. His name is Lord Zakar. I think you may find him. ... Interesting. Alara's heart sank at the mention of Zakar's name. She forced a smile, but the thought of another suitor made her feel even more distant from the life she longed for. I'll join the others shortly, father, she said. But I need a little time. The king gave her a knowing look, but said nothing more. Very well, my dear. Just remember, the future of our kingdom rests on your shoulders. Choose wisely. As he walked away, Alara stared out at the stars once more. Her heart felt heavy, and her thoughts were clouded with doubt. She didn't want to disappoint her father, or her people. But she couldn't help the longing in her chest for something more than this royal life. A human, she thought. If only a human could see me as I truly am. The grand hall was filled with music and laughter as guests from all over the galaxy mingled, sharing stories of their travels and trading in polite conversation. Princess Ilara stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the scene unfold with a quiet sadness. She had done her duty, greeting the many guests and smiling politely at the various suitors who had come to seek her hand. But her heart was not in it. Lord Zakar stood across the room, surrounded by a small group of his own people, boasting of his battles and conquests. His loud voice echoed through the hall, speaking of his army's might and the vast territories he had claimed. He was impressive, no doubt, but to Alara, his words felt empty. He spoke of power and control, but never of love or kindness. You met him yet, princess? A voice asked, breaking through her thoughts. Ilara turned to see her mother, Queen Selene, standing beside her with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Lord Zakara, Ilara replied, her voice soft. Yes, I've spoken with him. He is very passionate about his conquests. The queen's smile tightened. He is a good match for you, Alara. Powerful, respectable, a strong ally for our kingdom. Alara nodded, but her heart sank. She had heard it all before. Her mother, her father, and the court all spoke of these suitors as if they were prizes to be won. No one ever asked her what she wanted. No one ever asked if she had dreams beyond the throne, beyond the kingdom. You should give him a chance, Queen Selene added gently. But there was a firmness in her voice. You know your duties, dear? And it is time to think of the future. Clara forced a smile and nodded again, though it felt like a heavy burden. I understand. Mother, as the night continued, Ilara tried to keep up appearances. She spoke with the other suitors, exchanging pleasantries and nodding in approval at their stories. Yet each conversation felt more distant than the last. None of them seemed to notice the real Ilara. They only saw the princess, the future ruler. She felt like a stranger to herself in the midst of all the attention and expectations. The night stretched on, and Ilara found herself growing more tired. The music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, none of it brought her joy. As the guests continued to dance and talk, she slipped quietly away from the crowd. Retreating to the palace gardens, the cool night air brushed against her skin as she wandered among the flowers, her thoughts heavy with the weight of her position. The stars above seemed so far away, just like the life she dreamed of. Gosh. She longed for someone who would see her not as a princess, but as a person. Someone who could understand her heart. Her mind drifted to the humans once again. They were so different from the other beings in the galaxy, rough around the edges, yet full of passion and spirit. The stories she had heard of them were always so full of wonder, were fighters, adventurers, and dreamers. Ilara couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to meet one. Speak with someone who wasn't blinded by the weight of royalty and politics. Princess Ilara. A voice suddenly called out from behind her. Ilara turned, startled, to see a figure stepping into the moonlight. It was a human. He was tall and dressed in the simple uniform of a soldier, his eyes warm and kind, a stark contrast to the other suitors she had met that night. His name was Samuel. He had arrived earlier in the evening, along with a small group of humans, sent to represent their planet in the ongoing negotiations between the Empire and Earth. Unlike the other diplomats, Samuel had kept to himself, quietly observing the celebration from the sidelines. Ilara had noticed him earlier, but she hadn't expected him to approach her now, in the quiet of the garden. Are you lost, human? Ilara asked, her voice softer than she intended. Samuel smiled, stepping closer. Was hoping I could speak with you, princess. Ilara raised an eyebrow. It was rare for anyone to speak to her so openly, especially one of the humans. Is you want to speak with me? Yes, he said, his tone sincere. I've heard stories of the great Princess Ilara, but none of them mention what kind of person you really are. Ilara felt a flush of surprise. What do you mean? You don't seem like the kind of person who enjoys all the attention. The grand parties and suitors, Samuel said, his voice low. I could see it in your eyes when you were talking to them. You're looking for something more than all this, aren't you? Ilara was taken aback. No one had ever been so honest with her before. I don't know what I'm looking for anymore. Samuel stepped closer, his expression thoughtful. Maybe you don't need to know yet. Maybe you just need someone to listen, someone who doesn't want anything from you except for you to be yourself. Ilara felt a strange warmth in her chest. For the first time that evening, she felt seen, truly seen. This human, this soldier, didn't look at her as a princess or a tool to be used. He looked at her as a person. I don't want to be just a princess, Ilara said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. I want to be more than that. I want to be understood. Samuel nodded slowly. You're not alone in that. Everyone wants to be understood, no matter where they come from. For a moment, there was silence between them. Stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, the air a little warmer. Ilara felt as if she had found something important, something she had been searching for all along. I'm Samuel, the human said with a soft smile, extending his hand. Ilara hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand gently. Ilara, she replied, her voice quieter now, but filled with a sense of hope. In that moment, amidst the distant stars and the quiet hum of the palace, Ilara felt like she had found someone who could truly understand her. A small part of her heart, which had long been locked away, felt like it was beginning to open. Princess Ilara couldn't stop thinking about Samuel. After their conversation in the garden, everything seemed different. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly seen. Not as a princess, not as someone who was expected to rule, but as a person. She found herself looking for him at the grand palace events, hoping to catch a glimpse of him, to speak with him again. But it wasn't easy. The court was full of so many other suitors and diplomats, and Samuel was always so quiet, so distant. He kept to himself, his head bowed in respect whenever he spoke to anyone. To the others, he was just a human among many others. But to Ilara, he was someone who had shown her kindness, someone who had treated her like a real person. Days passed, and still, Ilara could not shake the feeling that something had changed in her heart, as she could no longer pretend to be interested. In the other suitors who filled her world, Lord Zakar and the others were all polite, all respectful, but they were not kind in the way Samuel had been. None of them had looked at her with the same understanding. None of them had cared enough to listen. One afternoon, while Ilara was walking through the palace gardens, she saw him again. Samuel was standing near the fountain, looking up at the sky. He seemed so at peace, so calm that it made Ilara's heart skip a beat. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should approach him. But then, with a deep breath, she decided to go forward. Samuel, she called softly. He turned, his expression lighting up when he saw her. Princess Ilara, he said with a respectful bow, though his voice was warm and inviting. Good to see you, Ilara smiled, feeling a little nervous. I was hoping to speak with you again. Of course, he said, stepping aside so she could join him by the fountain. I'm glad you came. They stood together in silence for a moment, the sound of the flowing water calming both of them. Ilara wanted to speak, to tell him how she had been feeling, but she wasn't sure where to begin. I don't often get to have real conversations with anyone, Ilara finally said, her voice soft. Not like this. Everyone always has an agenda, or they just want something from me. I don't know what it's like to be seen as a person instead of a princess. Samuel nodded slowly, his gaze thoughtful. I understand. In my world, people sometimes only see you for what you can do or what you represent, not for who you really are. Ilara looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of insincerity. But there was none. Samuel wasn't pretending. He wasn't trying to gain anything from her. He was simply offering her a moment of real connection. "I think you're the first person who has ever treated me like that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know why, but I feel ... comfortable around you. Like I don't have to hide behind all the expectations." Samuel smiled warmly. "I'm glad. You deserve that, Alara. You deserve to be understood for who you are, not just for what others expect of you." Alara's heart swelled with something she had never felt before: hope. She didn't know where this connection with Samuel would lead, but she knew that it was different from anything she had ever experienced. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't there to seek power, and he wasn't there to use her. He was simply there to listen. "I wish I could leave all of this behind," Alara said, looking around the gardens, the palace, the politics, the suitors. Sometimes it feels like I'm trapped in a world that's not mine, but I can't leave. I have a duty. I have a responsibility to my people." Samuel's expression softened. "I can't imagine how hard that must be. To carry so much weight on your shoulders, but it's okay to want something more than duty. It's okay to want happiness too." Alara felt her eyes fill with tears. She quickly blinked them away, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me. I should be grateful for everything I have. My family loves me, and I have everything I need. But I feel ... empty, like there's something missing." "Not alone in feeling that way," Samuel said gently. "Sometimes we get so caught up in our roles that we forget to live for ourselves. But you don't have to give up your happiness for your duty. You can still be yourself, even with all the responsibilities that come with being a princess." Alara took a deep breath, the weight in her chest feeling a little lighter. For the first time, she felt like someone truly understood her, someone who wasn't judging her for her feelings. It was a relief she hadn't known she needed. "Thank you, Samuel," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't know how much this means to me." Samuel looked at her with kindness. "I'm just glad I could be here for you, Alara. You don't have to carry everything on your own. There are people who care about you, even if it doesn't always seem that way." Alara felt a warmth spreading through her chest. She had always thought that she had to face everything alone, that her duties came first and everything else came second. But standing here with Samuel, she realized that maybe she didn't have to carry the burden of the world by herself. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, the future where she could still be a princess, but also a person who could choose her own happiness. As they stood together by the fountain, the sounds of the palace far behind them, Alara felt a new sense of hope take root in her heart. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she knew that she was no longer alone. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. The days following Alara's conversation with Samuel felt different. The weight that had once settled heavily on her chest had lifted a little. She found herself looking forward to the quiet moments she could steal away from her royal duties too. Think about him. Samuel had become a constant in her thoughts, and she couldn't deny that a small part of her felt drawn to him. Despite her growing feelings, Alara knew the path ahead would not be easy. She was still a princess, and the expectations of her people, her family, and her court were clear. A princess did not form bonds with someone beneath her status, especially not a human, who was seen as little more than a curiosity in the galaxy. The royal court buzzed with anticipation as the leaders of different alien worlds gathered to discuss important matters. The suitors continued to arrive, each one more impressive than the last. But Alara couldn't bring herself to care about any of them. Lord Zakara was still persistent, often seeking her out to speak of his many conquests and his vision of a powerful future with her by his side. He spoke of alliances, of strength, and of growing their empire, yet his words meant nothing to her. All she wanted was someone who could see her as Alara, the girl who dreamed of something more than power. Alara found herself growing frustrated by the constant reminders of her duty. Her mother, the queen, had made it clear once again that it was time to choose a suitor to secure the future of the empire. But how could she choose someone when her heart was somewhere else? How could she make a decision that would affect so many lives when she was so unsure of her own? One evening, after another tiring round of meetings and social gatherings, Alara slipped away from the palace once more. She wandered through the palace gardens, seeking a moment of peace. The stars above twinkled brightly, casting a soft light. On the world around her was her place of solitude, the one place where she could breathe and think without the pressure of her royal role bearing down on her. She was not alone. However, as she walked along the path lined with flowers, she spotted Samuel sitting by the fountain, his gaze fixed on the flowing water. He looked peaceful, content, and for a brief moment, Ilara wished she could be as carefree as he appeared. "Samuel," she called, her voice soft but sure. He turned at the sound of her voice, his face lighting up with a smile when he saw her. "Princess Ilara." He greeted her with a slight bow, though there was no stiffness in his posture, just warmth and kindness. "I didn't expect to see you out here tonight." Ilara smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. "I needed a break. The palace. Sometimes it's overwhelming." "I can imagine," Samuel replied, his tone thoughtful. "It's not easy being in the spotlight all the time. I've seen the way the nobles watch you. They expect so much." Ilara nodded, her chest tightening. "It's like I can't do anything right. My family wants me to choose a suitor. The court wants me to secure an alliance, and all I want is to be seen for who I truly am." Samuel's expression softened with understanding. "It's not easy, Ilara, when you're constantly expected to be something you're not. It's hard to figure out who you really are." Ilara sat beside him by the fountain, her eyes following the ripples in the water. "I feel like I'm stuck between two worlds. The one where I'm a princess, with all the responsibilities and expectations that come with it, and the one where I just want to live my life. I want to choose for myself, but I'm afraid of letting everyone down." "Choosing for yourself isn't selfish," Samuel said gently. "It's the most honest thing you can do. If you live your life based on what everyone else wants, you'll never know who you really are." Ilara looked at him, her heart racing slightly at the honesty. In his words, "I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I have the strength." "You do," Samuel replied confidently. "You're stronger than you think. You just have to trust yourself, Ilara. Don't let the world tell you who to be. You have the power to choose your path." Ilara felt a surge of emotion welling up. Inside her, it was the first time someone had spoken to her like this, as if she were more than just a title, more than just a princess. For the first time in a long time, she felt like her choices mattered. She leaned back slightly, staring up at the stars. "But what if I make the wrong choice? If I choose the wrong person or the wrong path?" "The wrong choice doesn't mean it's the end," Samuel said. "Every decision leads to something. Even mistakes teach us something valuable. But it's the act of choosing, of deciding what feels right to you, that matters." Ilara took a deep breath, feeling as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. It wasn't easy, but maybe Samuel was right. Maybe it was time for her to stop worrying about what everyone else thought and start focusing on what she needed. For a long moment, they sat together in silence, the sound of the water flowing peacefully around them. Ilara felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Samuel's presence was comforting, and she couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to have him by her side. Could she follow her heart and still be the leader her people needed? "Thank you, Samuel," Ilara said quietly, her voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know what I would do without you." Samuel smiled, his eyes warm and sincere. "I'm always here for you, Ilara. You don't have to face this alone." As the stars shone above them, Ilara knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, obstacles, and decisions that would test her. But for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face them. She had someone who believed in her, someone who saw her for who she truly was. And maybe, just maybe, that was all she needed to take the first step toward the future she had always dreamed of. The days that followed Ilara's conversation with Samuel were filled with uncertainty. She couldn't stop thinking about the path she was being forced to walk. The pressure of the court, the demands of her family, and the ever-present suitors, who expected her to choose one of them, weighed heavily on her heart. She had always known that duty would come first. But now, for the first time in her life, she found herself questioning everything. Samuel had been a constant source of comfort to her, and their connection had only grown stronger in the days since. Their conversation by the fountain, She had begun to see him not only as a kind friend, but as someone who truly cared for her. He didn't look at her as a princess, as the future ruler of the empire, but simply as Alara. That was something she had longed for her entire life. But could she follow her heart, or was she bound to the throne? As the pressure mounted, Alara found herself becoming more withdrawn. She spent less time with the suitors and more time in the palace gardens, walking the paths and thinking about her future. The court had taken notice of her change in behavior, and whispers began to spread. Some said she was simply being difficult, that it was just a phase. Others whispered that her heart had already been given to someone. It wasn't one of the suitors. Alara tried to push the thoughts aside, but they lingered. Her mother, the queen, had become more insistent about finding a suitor. The pressure to make a choice was becoming unbearable. Every day, she was expected to meet with the suitors, smile, and pretend that everything was fine, but it wasn't fine. She wasn't fine. One evening, during a grand banquet held in honor of a visiting diplomat, Alara found herself once again seated beside Lord Zakar. He was speaking of his latest military achievements, his words full of pride and arrogance. She nodded politely, but her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about Samuel. She hadn't seen him for a few days, and a part of her missed him deeply. She found herself growing restless, wishing she could escape the banquet hall and speak with him. Her thoughts were interrupted when Zakar leaned closer. "You seem distracted, princess," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I must admit I'm a little disappointed. You and I have shared some wonderful conversations in recent days. I thought we were beginning to understand each other." Alara forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry, Lord Zakar. I've had a lot on my mind lately." Zakar raised an eyebrow, his expression turning slightly suspicious. "You've been quite distant lately. Is it something I've said? Perhaps I have not been the suitor you hoped for." Alara didn't know how to answer. The truth was Zakar had never been what she wanted. He was powerful, yes, and he would make an excellent ruler alongside her, but he was not someone who made her feel alive. He was a man of power, not of heart. "I think I need some air," Alara said abruptly, standing up from the table. She didn't wait for Zakar's response as she walked out of the banquet hall. The cool night air hit her as she stepped outside, and she breathed in deeply, grateful for the silence away from the chatter of the court. She didn't know how long. She had been walking when she found herself near the palace gardens again. She needed a moment to think, to clear her mind. But the more she walked, the more conflicted she became. Her heart was torn between her duty and her desire for something more. She was the future ruler of the empire, but she was also a person, with dreams, desires, and feelings that were just as important as she wandered through the gardens. She heard footsteps behind her. She turned, and there, standing in the moonlight, was Samuel. His presence was a comfort to her as always. He wasn't dressed in the formal clothes of the court. He wore the simple uniform of a soldier, and he looked more relaxed than he ever did in the grand halls of the palace. "Samuel," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I didn't expect to find you alone," Samuel replied with a soft smile. "But I'm glad I did. You seemed upset back there." Alara's heart ached. She wanted to tell him everything, to open up about the doubts that had been growing inside her. The words wouldn't come. She didn't know where to start. "I don't know what to do anymore," Alara finally said, her voice breaking. "The court is pushing me to choose a suitor. My mother is insistent, and I don't know how to choose someone when my heart is not in it. I don't know if I can do this. I don't want to disappoint anyone, but I don't want to marry someone I don't care about either." Samuel stepped closer, his gaze steady and comforting. "Alara, you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to make a decision just to please others. You have the right to choose your happiness, to choose someone who makes you feel whole." Alara's chest tightened. She looked at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt, but there was none. He was speaking from the heart, and it was the first time in her life that she truly felt like someone was giving her the freedom to be herself. "I wish I could be like you," Alara whispered, "so sure of what I want." "You are sure," Samuel said gently. "You're just afraid to listen to your own heart because of the pressure around you. But you don't have to carry all of this alone, Alara. You can choose your own path, and I'll be here, no matter what you decide." Her heart raced as she looked at him, her emotions swirling inside her. She didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace. Samuel was offering her something she had never had before, the freedom to make her own choice. "I don't know what I'll choose," Ilara said quietly, "but I think I know where my heart is." Samuel smiled, his eyes full of understanding. "That's all that matters." The decision was finally upon her. Ilara stood at the balcony of the palace, looking out at the grand city below. It was a sight she had seen 1,000 times before, yet today it felt different. The weight of the future was heavier than ever. Her parents, the royal advisors, and the entire court were all watching her, waiting for her to make her choice. But how could she choose between duty and her heart? How could she pick someone to spend her life with when the one person who truly understood her was not the one she was expected to marry? Samuel had been there for her through it all. He had shown her kindness and support in ways no one else ever had. He treated her as a person, not a princess. He listened to her, cared for her, and made her feel seen in a way she never had before. But he was a human, and the Empire would never accept their union. She couldn't risk everything for a chance at happiness, or could she? The door to the balcony creaked open, and Ilara turned to see her mother, Queen Selene, stepping into the room. The queen's face was calm, but there was a sense of urgency in her eyes. "Ilara," she said softly, her voice gentle yet firm. "The court is waiting. The suitors are here, all ready to pledge themselves to you. It's time to make your choice." Ilara's heart tightened. "I know, Mother. I don't know what to do." Queen Selene walked toward her, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "I know this is difficult, but you must understand that your choice isn't just about you. It's about the future of the Empire. You have a duty to your people, to your father's legacy." "I know, Mother," Ilara whispered, her voice trembling. "But what about my happiness? What about me?" The queen's expression softened, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "Your happiness is important, Ilara, but sometimes we have to put duty first. The Empire must come before personal desires." Ilara turned away, her heart heavy with the burden of her mother's words. She had always known that duty would come first, but the thought of marrying someone she didn't love felt unbearable. Lord Zacher, the most persistent of the suitors, was standing by the throne. His chest puffed with pride, waiting for her to choose him. He was powerful, yes. He would make a strong ally. But he didn't know her. He didn't see her, and then there was Samuel. He was different. He had always seen her as Ilara, not the princess, not the future ruler. He saw her for who she was inside, and for the first time, she felt like someone truly cared for her. But how could she throw away everything for a man who was nothing more than a soldier, human, someone her people would never accept? "You must decide soon," Queen Selene said, breaking the silence. "The court is growing restless. The future of the Empire rests on your shoulders." Ilara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her responsibilities. The future of the galaxy, the future of her people, how could she choose herself when so much was at stake? But then she remembered Samuel's words. She remembered the way he had spoken to her, the way he had treated her with respect and care. He had never asked for anything from her, and he had always been there when she needed him. She took a deep breath and turned to face her mother. "I've made my decision." Queen Selene raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "What do you mean?" "Will not choose Lord Zacher," Ilara said, her voice steady. "I cannot marry someone I don't love. I cannot live my life for duty alone." The queen's face hardened and she stepped back, her expression filled with disappointment. "You are making a mistake, Ilara. The court will never accept your decision. The Empire will be in turmoil if you choose a human over a powerful suitor. You are not just a princess. You are the future of our kingdom." "I understand, Mother," Ilara said softly, her heart aching. "But I cannot live for the kingdom if I am not living for myself. I can't be the ruler they want me to be if I am not true to who I am." The queen's eyes filled with sorrow, but she said nothing more. She turned and walked toward the door, leaving Ilara alone with her thoughts. Ilara stood there for a long moment, her mind racing. She had chosen her heart over her duty. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was the right one for her. She couldn't marry someone just to satisfy the court. She couldn't live a life of lies. She had to be true to herself, even if it meant defying her family and the expectations of the empire. As the night grew quiet, Ilara left the balcony and made her way to the palace gates. She needed to find Samuel. She needed to speak with him, to tell him what she had decided. As she walked through the halls, her footsteps echoing in the silence, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She was finally making a choice for herself. When she reached the gardens, she found Samuel sitting by the fountain once again. He looked up when he heard her approach, and a smile spread across his face. "Ilara," he said, standing up to greet her. "I was hoping to see you." "I've made my decision," Ilara said, her voice full of determination. "I won't marry Lord Zakar. I can't. I choose you, Samuel." Samuel's eyes widened, and for a moment he said nothing. Then he took a step forward and took her hands in his. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. "It's not going to be easy. The Empire won't accept this. But if you're sure—" "I'm sure," Ilara said, her heart swelling with hope. "I'm ready to live my life, to make my own choices. And I want you by my side." Samuel smiled, his eyes filled with love and admiration. "Then we'll face it together." And in that moment, Ilara knew that whatever the future held, she had made the right choice. She had chosen herself, and she had chosen the person who saw her for who she truly was. And that was all that mattered.